History is full of royal power plays, epic battles and inbreeding. Yep. Some monarchs took keeping it in the family way too seriously. From jaw-dropping deformities to total genetic disasters, here are the top 7 most extreme cases of royal inbreeding. Buckle up. It's going to get weird. Kicking off our list at number 7 is George III of England. You know him as the Mad King who lost America. But did you know his porphyria, a nasty genetic disorder, was likely thanks to centuries of cousin marrying? In George III's case, it also triggered episodes of mental illness. He experienced hallucinations, uncontrollable speech, and violent mood swings. He sometimes spoke for hours without stopping, had fits of wild laughter, and was known to babble incoherently while foaming at the mouth. Historians have debated whether George's illness was purely genetic or exacerbated by stress and his rigid lifestyle. Some accounts claim he even tried to shake hands with a tree, thinking it was the King of Prussia. His fits of insanity, hallucinations, and bizarre behavior might have been preventable if his ancestors had mixed up the gene pool. Sliding into number 6, we've got Cleopatra of Egypt. Cleopatra wasn't just a powerful queen. She was also the product of centuries of sibling marriages in the Ptolemaic dynasty. Her parents, likely brother and sister. Her grandparents, also siblings. And her great-grandparents, you guessed it, more of the same. The Ptolemies, a Greek ruling family in Egypt, had a strict policy only members of the royal bloodline could rule, which meant repeated sibling marriages. And Cleopatra kept the tradition alive. She first married her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, before later marrying another brother, Ptolemy XIV. She co-ruled with them before strategically getting rid of them. These weren't just political marriages. This was how the Ptolemies ensured their pure Macedonian blood stayed intact. But was Cleopatra the stunning beauty we often imagine? Not quite. Recent reconstructions, based on ancient coins and statues, suggest she likely had a prominent hooked nose, a possible sign of generations of inbreeding catching up. While Roman propaganda often exaggerated her features to mock her, some scholars believe her distinctive look was a direct result of her royal family's refusal to marry outsiders. So next time you think of Cleopatra, forget the Hollywood version and picture a queen with a very close family. Maybe too close. At number 5, we have one of the most infamous father-son duos in history, Pharaoh Akhenaten and his son Tutankhamun. Ancient Egypt loved royal sibling marriages, but Akhenaten took things to a whole new level by marrying his own daughter. His son, Tutankhamun, better known as King Tut, was the unfortunate result of generations of inbreeding. DNA tests even confirmed his parents were full siblings, and he paid the genetic price. He was born with a clubfoot, scoliosis, and a severely weakened immune system. His bones were so fragile that he likely needed a cane just to walk. But that's not all. His body also showed evidence of multiple bouts of malaria, which his compromised immune system struggled to fight off. Some experts believe these health issues contributed to his early death at just 18 or 19 years old. Pharaohs thought they were gods, but their genes sure didn't agree. Coming in strong at number 4 is Joanna of Castile. Joanna of Castile was better known as Juana la Loca, or Joanna the Mad. But was she actually insane, or just a victim of inbreeding? Juana was a member of the Habsburg dynasty, a family notorious for keeping things a little too close in the family tree. Her Habsburg ancestors refused to marry outside their own gene pool, leading to serious mental instability in their bloodline. Generations of inbreeding led to all kinds of physical and mental health issues, and Juana may have been one of its most famous victims, but her so-called madness might not have been genetic at all. It could have been pure heartbreak and political betrayal. Juana's obsessive love for her husband and rumored mental breakdowns might have been symptoms of that genetic chaos. How obsessed was she? Juana was deeply in love, some say obsessively, with her husband Philip the Handsome. Unfortunately, Philip was less than devoted. He cheated on her constantly, and when Juana reacted with jealousy and emotional outbursts, people started whispering that she was crazy. But when Philip suddenly died in 1506, possibly from typhoid, though rumors of poisoning swirled, Juana completely unraveled. And here's where things get really weird. Juana refused to accept his death. She kept Philip's corpse near her for years, traveling with it in a lead-lined coffin. According to legend, she even slept next to it and occasionally opened it just to gaze at him. Some stories claim she wouldn't allow other women near the body out of jealousy. Yes, even after he was dead. Was this the result of centuries of inbreeding, extreme grief, or just a convenient excuse for her political enemies to lock her away? Her father, King Ferdinand of Aragon, and later her own son, Charles V, both declared her insane, conveniently keeping her out of power for the rest of her life. She was imprisoned for nearly 50 years, dying in isolation in 1555. Now we're in the top three. At number 3 is Ferdinand I of Austria, a tragic example of what happens when a family tree turns into a circle. Like we mentioned before, the Habsburgs were notorious for inbreeding, and by the time Ferdinand was born, their genetic luck had officially run out. His parents, Emperor Francis II and Maria Theresa of Naples and Sicily, were double first cousins, meaning they shared the same 2 sets of grandparents. The result? Ferdinand suffered from severe epilepsy, hydrocephalus, which is a swollen head due to excess fluid, and an intellectual disability so profound that ruling an empire was completely out of the question. Despite these challenges, Ferdinand was crowned Emperor of Austria in 1835. But let's be real, he wasn't running the show. His advisors made all the decisions while he lived in a carefully controlled bubble. And now for the famous dumpling story. According to legend, Ferdinand once laughed uncontrollably after being told that kings don't eat dumplings. His rule finally came to an end in 1848 during the revolutions that swept across Europe. With Austria in chaos, Ferdinand was forced to abdicate, making way for his much more capable nephew, Franz Joseph I. He spent the rest of his life in quiet exile, far away from politics. Ferdinand's tragic reign was the Habsburgs' ultimate genetic warning sign. After centuries of inbreeding, the dynasty was producing rulers who literally couldn't rule. So close to the top, the runner-up at number 2 is Queen Victoria and her royal offspring. Queen Victoria married her cousin, but she took inbreeding to a continental scale. She strategically married off her children and grandchildren into nearly every major royal house of Europe, ensuring that the gene pool of European royalty remained incredibly tight-knit. Queen Victoria didn't just rule an empire, she spread haemophilia across Europe. Victoria was a genetic carrier of this blood disorder which prevents proper clotting and leads to severe internal bleeding. The reason? Her family tree was packed with cousin marriages. She married her first cousin, Prince Albert, and then married off her children to other royals across Europe, unknowingly spreading haemophilia into the royal bloodlines of Russia, Germany, and Spain. Her descendants, including the famous Russian Tsarevich Alexei, suffered from the disease which contributed to the fall of the Russian Empire. The royal disease was literally caused by inbreeding. Ladies and gentlemen, we present the ultimate inbreeding disaster, Charles II of Spain. If there was ever a walking warning against keeping it all in the family, this poor guy was it. Charles was the final ruler of the Spanish Habsburgs, a dynasty so obsessed with keeping their bloodline pure that by the time he was born, their family tree looked more like a wreath. His parents, uncle and niece. His grandparents, also uncle and niece. Generations of inbreeding had finally caught up, and Charles paid the price. His most infamous feature, the Habsburg jaw, so severe that his lower jaw jutted out, making it nearly impossible for him to chew food properly. His tongue was so large he could barely speak, and his speech was often unintelligible, but that was just the beginning. Physically, he was a mess. He suffered from seizures, digestive disorders, and muscle weakness so extreme that he couldn't walk until he was nearly 8 years old. By his 30s, his court physicians declared he had the body of a 70-year-old man. Mentally, he wasn't much better. He was reportedly childlike and easily manipulated with limited intellectual abilities. The Spanish court even believed he was cursed, and desperate nobles resorted to exorcisms to heal him. Spoiler, it didn't work. And the final blow, he was sterile. The extreme inbreeding left him unable to produce an heir, ending the Spanish Habsburg line forever. When Charles died in 1700 at just 38 years old, Spain was left in crisis, triggering the War of Spanish Succession. So, what did we learn today? Maybe, marrying outside the family isn't such a bad idea. If you liked this deep dive into royal weirdness, hit that like button, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, which royal family do you think had the worst case of inbreeding? See you next time.